All right. There we have it. Before we get into these hydraulics, just wanted to close out the circuit breakers from last video because I didn't get a chance to put them in. We've received them now. Got the 100 amp here, which will be for our alternator, the 30 amp for everything else. So I've just been going back and forth on where to mount them. I think we're going to go down along here, one there, next one there. So I'll drill some mounting holes there and get them bolted in. All right, that's our circuit breakers mounted, wired up. Once we get an alternator sorted, we'll get a cable run across around to the alternator on the other side there from that 100 amp breaker. But for now, that leaves us with an operational machine. So if you cast your mind back to the last video on this hydraulic system that we did, you'll remember our filter here that we teared down and found full of rubber, cleaned it out, new element, serviced, ready to go. We've got some new bolts here, 3/8 UNC by 1.5 inch, flat washers, nylocks, simple as that. I'm going to put 4 bolts through and get this nice and secure back to our battery bracket. All right, that's it, mounted on. So as you can see, probably a little bit overkill on the OD of these washers here. I really just hate the look of when a washer overhangs, but at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot better than that nut digging into the housing here. So it's going to technically correct, cosmetically leaves a little bit to be desired, but we've got full engagement on the nylocks. That is solid as a rock there. All right, we are ready to get some hoses connected up to this thing and keep cracking. Casting our mind back to the previous video on this steering system, you may recall that we need to figure out how to mount this rotary control valve here and this steering column onto this round section of the machine's frame here, and we need to make a bracket to do that. This is Autodesk Fusion, and I drew this up using the sheet metal tools in the program. So what I came up with was using the diameter of that round section, created this arc. The pattern you see here matches both the rotary control valve and the steering column. They were a matched pair, so that was quite straightforward. I was able to get manufacturing drawings for the flange, hole cutout and the bolts and draw that in. And what you may notice here is it is quite long, so it's a lot of distance hanging back, which obviously you want to keep that distance as short as possible to reduce the moment on this joint here and obviously make it nice and strong. But what I'm working against as the constraint here is in this area down here, we're going to have the hoses and the fittings coming out of the back of that control valve, and I need clearance against this the machine's frame back down this edge here. So that's why we had to push the control valve out to there, give room for the hoses to come out of the valve and then go 90 degrees down towards the base. So the only other feature on this is this tab at the front here. Now, I don't have a great reason for putting this on there. I figured that if I wanted to put a sheet metal cover to cover the front of this control valve and the broader steering system there, that I'd want something to affix up to. So that's an option there. Also, I thought that because I don't have a 100% plan at the moment of how we're going to mount the shift, forward neutral reverse and high and low range levers, I thought I may need to put something back to there as well. So I put that on. I figured it's not going to hurt. It's going to clear everything there. And we'll jump now and I'll just show you what this looked like drawing it up. So jumping straight out of CAD into the real world here, and we have the physical product. I had this laser cut and CNC folded because it was a little bit more precise and a bit finer details, and it has come out an absolute treat. Really happy with how that's come up. So let's see how good we did on our measuring and drawing. That's about a perfect fit up there. So that is how it's going to sit. I'm going to match the angle to the original steering column as best I can, and it's just a couple of little welds. It's only 4mm, so it's not too much weld prep required. I'm just going to grind some of this paint off here, find my angle and tack it on. Now this is probably a little bit of overkill for getting the angle of a steering wheel on a piece of earth moving machinery that you're not going to sit on for very long, but nonetheless we've got to do it. So it's going to take the same time to do it right as it would be to make a rough test. So this spirit level you can see here, I'm using that as a straight edge, and that is resting on the existing steering column mount. As that sits there, that is the angle of the original steering column. I've got a square here and I'm going to put the bracket up on the rail like that. Now that self aligns itself because I did cut that to the exact diameter there, and I'm going to put this square along my straight edge there, and I'm going to match up the bottom angle looking along the side of it here. Which is it there. And then I'm going to mark the top position there. All right, now that I've got that marked there, I can just transfer that across, roughly across there. And that is what we're going to line our mount up to, which is going to be there. So I did bring the steering column down here. I don't have the steering wheel on me at the moment, but just to give a little more indication of how it looks, that's what we're going to sit there. And our orbital valve, steering control valve, will be sitting directly underneath that. So get back and have a little bit closer look, but that looks really good. It matches all the existing, every piece of sheet metal down here, like this piece here, just the orientation of everything. They're 90 degrees to that angle. Everything is built based off that steering column angle. So, you know, although it's not a major thing, whether it's like that or whether it's a couple of degrees off like that for the steering wheel, it's just going to make the machine look a little bit more original. Day's getting on a little bit. It's about 8:30 at night, but we're cracking on. Got the bracket here, welder set up, ready to go. So we're going to put some tacks on this and weld it out. Got that tacked on there now. I don't know if you would have picked that up on the camera, but that was nowhere near enough heat into this big member here. I went into that with no knowledge at all of how thick that was, but it's quite evident that it is some very thick material, because that is just soaking all the heat up. Even now, I only just finished tacking that and I can touch that, it's cold as. So I don't have an oxy available at the moment, but I do have my little plumber's bottle, so we're going to do a bit of preheat with that and try and get it as hot as we can on this. I'm just playing around with, obviously this is reacting as though it's somewhere in that, you know, 3/8 thickness range, if not more. And we've got our little 4mm plate here. So just trying to vary the heat between the two and try and crank as much heat into this, but I think preheating is just going to make our life a lot easier. So we'll warm it up as much as we can now and then see if we can get it stuck together. That's welded on there. No work of art by any stretch, but she is solid as a rock. It's probably a few of you wondering why I'm welding this with a TIG when it's clearly a perfect application for a MIG or a stick welder. It's simply what I have available to me right now. So we're just making do with what we got for today, and that did the job. So it certainly needed that preheat. Once I got that into there, we were fine. There was a few weird angles around the place, so did dip the tungsten a couple of times, you probably saw, but stopped, cleaned it up, kept going. And on the underside, I just did a few little stitches, one on each side, one in the middle, more tacks almost. I wasn't really gonna lie under there and run a full bead. There's good enough penetration I can see through on that one, so she's good to go. We'll probably seal that off with a little bit of primer, just in the interim until we get everything ready to bolt on there. And then we might just clean that section up a little bit better and put a bit of paint on there before we go together for the final time. This bracket down here is for the old steering column. Now that I've set this angle, that can go. I've got to cut that off because that's probably going to interfere with our hydraulic lines. From there, apart from measuring out some hydraulic lines, it's a bit of a bolt together kit. I've got a welder drive a hex drive onto the end of that steering shaft. We'll do that back in the shop. But on the machine itself, we are getting to that assembly stage. So pretty keen now. We'll keep going and just get this thing knocked out. Had to shut the camera off there, just the lens was getting hammered with the rain, but ground that off, chucked a bit of primer on it just to temporarily seal that off for the time being, and now we are ready to fit the steering column and the control valve. So I need to get a steering wheel onto this steering column, so you don't have a lot of options if you want to buy an off-the-shelf steering column, steering shaft, whatever you want to call it, to suit these orbital valves, Danfoss style. I've picked up this one and it came with a smooth 3/4 inch shaft, so no keyway, no taper, just a plain shaft. Now, obviously you've got a couple of options there. You could cut a taper into it. You can see here how they've done a roll forming on that end there. That locks the bearing in. So there's a circlip on the underside of the bearing. It's all the way up in there, so you're not going to get that off. And then, so they've put that circlip in, press the bearing down, and then put it onto there. So getting that shaft out, it's not in and out, it's not straightforward. It's basically, it seems to me that this is almost consumable in the sense that, you know, if that bearing fails, this was pretty cheap, this whole assembly, you just grab a new one. So how I'm going to get around it is I've bought what they call a quick connect or quick disconnect, quick release steering hub, which I don't really know what the intended purpose of these things are. I know that they use them in a lot of import cars that people play around with or whatever, but it's going to work exceptionally well for what we need. Socket drops straight over our shaft. It's just a nice clearance fit. I'm going to weld around the base there and that will become part of our shaft. Steering wheel's going to bolt onto this hub and that hub locks on like so. And it seems, this was obviously, it's all pretty cheap, you know, stuff, but the fitment of that socket into the hub, there's no play whatsoever, and it just drops out nicely. So I'm not too phased by it. I think it's going to do the job quite well, but either way, we'll put a weld around there. We're not going to be able to weld the inside because it's just so deep down in there, so I'm just going to weld the underside, hopefully without cooking the bearing in the top there, and see how it works. That's the finished product there, and our quick release hub here slides straight on and locks in place. Rotates well, so luckily we didn't get too much heat into the bearing, and this no distortion, that hub slides on and off perfect, and no run out in the shaft. as you can see by that heat affected zone, got a little bit hot there towards the end, but we made it through and got it done, which is the best we can do given we don't have a rotator, just do bit by bit. But that's ready to go. So we're going to fit the steering wheel to this hub now. We've got our little adapter piece here to get it to a 6-bolt and a 3-bolt. So I'm just going to put some fasteners together now and bolt it up. So I've got a couple of bare metal machine surfaces on these components here. So I'm just going to put a really light smear of grease on them just to stop them completely rusting out, because there is a seal on the input there. So the last thing we need is any rust or corrosion getting around that. And it's not really the most suitable spot to paint. I mean, I suppose you could, but this will do for what we need here. So I'll just do really light. And the reason, obviously, there's plenty of different sprays and stuff like that, but I generally find that when you go to pull something like this off in a year's time or more, that this sort of yields the best results. So a bit on there, one on top, if I can do it without dropping it, of course. Put a bolt through to stop that running away. There we go. And then we're going to bring this up underneath. Our hose is facing forward, or our outlets and inlets where we're going to put the hoses on. Line up splines and line up the threads. Over here. All right, in typical fashion, I did drop one of these bolts right through the machine onto the ground. So I'm going to jump down and grab that now and put our last one in. Found our runaway bolt in the dirt, cleaned it up and got this tightened up. We're going to lean on these ones a little bit because obviously we don't want our steering coming loose. But I did put a spring washer on all of these, so I don't foresee us having an issue with that. All right, it's nice and tight. Like a little bit of that grease that smeared out there. And that's pulled down really nicely. I'll bring you in a little bit closer here for a look. Column on top there, our bracket, and then control valve underneath here. So the reason why this bracket's as long as it is, as we sort of mentioned when we were drawing it up there, is to give the hoses clearance here. So we'll have to put a 90-degree elbow in all of these, but from what I've measured up, that should be enough to get a hose on there and an elbow. So that's the setup there. Like I showed you before, the wheel just clicks into that on and off. So it's a hell of a lot more compact than the old setup we had. Nice and simple. So that's it for this week, guys. We've got pretty much everything we need to get this thing up and running now. I just need time around the rain, because we are getting hammered with it this week. So bear with us, and we should see a fair bit of action in next week's video. Finishing touches on the top end of the steering column here. Just got this little weather dust seal that goes over the top. I'll put that guy on there, and then the steering wheel. So should just slide over and click into place like that. All right, there we have it. She's looking pretty fast. It's a bit ugly without any kind of center cap there, but look, for an old wheel loader, I think that'll do this trick. It really looks a little bit silly, but I didn't have a huge amount of options in steering wheels that would go to a 6-bolt pattern. They're all automotive style, so this was the most traditional looking, I guess you'd say, that I could find. It's not as nice as the old spoked ones, but look, we're going to run it for now, and it'll be more than enough to prove this thing out. And later on down the track, if we want to go that extra mile, we certainly can. Here's our hydraulic tank at the front of the machine. Now, when we pulled our filter apart here and serviced it, we found a heap of rubber broken down inside it from a hose, presumably a hose before the filter. What I want to see is if that hose was in the steering system, then most likely the filter caught most of, if not all of that debris and filtered it out. If it was elsewhere in the system, which is highly likely, it sucked it out of the tank, went through the steering system and obviously made its way back to the filter, in which case there'll be heaps of rubber and debris in this tank. I've got it set up here with a clean drain pan there just to get the first little bit out, and I just cracked this off camera, and you can already see that we've got water dripping out of that tank. See it going in the back there. So obviously that's not an ideal start, but regardless, I'm going to pop this guy out and we will see what else we have in store in here. Now, I don't have much capacity in this little drain pan beneath us, so I'm hoping that I can get this bung back in pretty quickly once I get it out. Oh, that is heaps of water. All right, there we go. Can't really expect to keep it much cleaner than that when you got that amount of head pressure behind it. But that was a good flow to flush out the dregs in the bottom. So I'm going to take our drain pan out into the sun a little bit here and see if we can see anything in the bottom of it. And there is quite a bit of crap in the water. What I'm going to do, seeing that, is drop the rest of the oil out. We'll get some bigger tubs under there, obviously. drop the rest of the oil out and then have a look through our fill port there, see if I can get a light and get some vision down in there to see the condition of the tank. And failing that, we can pull, we've got this flange here that we can pull off, and we've also got a flange on the other side that we can pull off if we do need to clean the tank. How good you could see that there, but running down the red flex funnel I had there, she got pretty chunky. There was a bit more contamination than we thought at first, so I am without question going to pop this top flange out. There should be a baffle in this tank, so we'll clean the top out and then we'll probably do the same down the bottom. I've got my long series ratchet here, which should make short work of these, so pop them off and give them a feel by hand first. Fingers crossed that we are not going to snap anything or have anything untoward. That's not off to a bad start there. Oh yeah, they're feeling really good. They should be on here. But I'm going to take you guys into the tank with me for the first time. I haven't seen what's in here, so... Okay. Sludgy. And... that's our outlet. You can see down there. And I'm not sure whether that's something sitting down here on top of the bottom flange or whether that's part of it. But just thick sludge. It's obviously a fair bit of debris, but we'll clean this top baffle off here with rags. Then we'll pop that bottom one out and see what we've got down there. Reach in and clean around there, and the rest will be washed. All right. There we have it. That is not looking too flash, but we'll be able to get it cleaned up, no doubt. All right, now, as often happens with projects like these, we haven't quite got as far as I would have liked to this week. So unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up there for the week. What I have picked up today is all our new hydraulic lines here, ends crimped on nicely, ready to go. So they're going to be the best hose on the whole machine. So pretty keen to get them hooked up and get some oil back in this thing, the hydraulic system going. So look, we continue on next week with this one, and we'll just keep cracking along and see what else we find along the way. But rest assured, we're moving forward. I'm going to stick with it and keep you guys on board as we go. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.